from the statute.
Thank you, Mr Shoebridge. I'll give the call to Mr Roberts, Assistant Speaker, President.
Thank you, Mr Deputy President. I rise on behalf of One Nation to lend our support to this bill. This bill is needed and long overdue. Members will remember that on the 21st of November 2019, I gave notice to introduce a similar bill, item 415 on the current notice paper for those that are interested. However, the government shortly after indicated that they would bring forward a bill that mirrored mine, and here we are today. This bill introduces a process where a person can be ordered to provide a blood sample for the purpose of testing if that person's bodily fluid has come into contact with an emergency service worker. This contact must be deliberate, and I emphasise it must be deliberate. I repeat, not accidental, but as a result of a deliberate action. The men and women of our police force, ambulance service, correctional workers, healthcare workers are often involved in confronting and violent situations as a direct result of the job that they are doing. But, Mr Deputy President, what is that job? That job is protecting the community and protecting the health and safety of others. They do this on our behalf. They operate on behalf of the community, and the community owes them an obligation to ensure that they are provided with the safest work conditions possible. During the course of their duties, there is times when these workers will be exposed to the bodily fluids of others. With this exposure comes the risk of transmission of blood-borne diseases such as hepatitis B, C and HIV. These diseases may have window periods of 3 to 6 months during which the disease is present in the body. This leads to long periods of uncertainty for the worker until it can be confirmed whether or not transmission has occurred. Now, Mr Deputy President, imagine yourself in their position, covered in blood, saliva, faeces, urine, because Mr Deputy President, that does happen. We heard evidence of that. We're not just talking about spitting on somebody. Imagine the stress and anxiety this would cause you. Not only you, but your family. Imagine not being able to hug and kiss your children, not breastfeed your baby, or have unprotected sex with your partner. The effects on your everyday life are profound. Now, Mr President, I have here a document which I've left back on the bench, and I know I can't use a prop, but it's there for members if they wish to peruse it. It's issued by New South Wales Health. Its identification is PD 2017_010, issued in May 2017. Thank you, Mark. The title is HIV, Hepatitis B and C, Management of Healthcare Workers Potentially Exposed. This is New South Wales Health, the lead organisation for the state on matters relating to health. At page 5 of the document, Mr Deputy President, under the heading of Risk Assessment of the Source Patient, it says that the source patient is to be tested as soon as practical. Page 9, Mr Deputy President, of the same document, under the heading of Advice for the Exposed Healthcare Worker during follow-up period, it states this: during the follow-up period, the exposed worker should be advised not to donate plasma, blood, body tissues, breast milk or sperm. Protect sexual partners by adapting safe sex practices, to seek medical advice regarding pregnancy and breastfeeding. The question, Mr Deputy President, is why is this information in a health directive? Why is it there? I'll tell you why. It's because the health department know it's possible for these blood-borne diseases to be transmitted to their workers. They know that. This is not rhetoric. This is not fantasy. This is in New South Wales Health's own document. The possibility of transmission is real and alive. It's not the posturing or musing of certain union bodies and organisations. Now, Mr Deputy President, no worker, no matter their profession, should be subjected to this. Every day in this chamber, mental health issues are raised, and today was yet another day. Well, imagine the mental health issues here, the anguish, the uncertainty that this causes. We as a society owe it to protect those that protect us. This bill seeks to address those concerns by mandating orders to require a third party who has deliberately, and I'll again emphasise those words, deliberately caused their body fluids to come into contact with the prescribed workers and to provide a blood sample for testing for the bloodborne diseases of HIV and hepatitis. This testing will provide certainty to those workers one way or another. It will determine and assist the treatment phase. It will certainly have an impact on lifestyle issues. Now, Mr Deputy President, I have heard concerns from numerous persons that this bill is a form of punishment. It is not. It provides a mechanism that is not present at the moment to facilitate the obtaining of a blood sample for medical purposes to assist in the diagnosis and the treatment protocol for workers that may have been infected. It does not provide for a new category of assault, for example. Now, I've also heard concerns that this will discriminate against members of the LGBT community. Now, I've read this bill numerous times. Nowhere in this bill does it mention a person's sexuality. A person's sexual preference is not relevant to this bill, Mr Deputy President. It is my belief, obtained from my own personal experience, that the overwhelming majority of the LGBT community are law-abiding citizens who just go about their business like everyone else. And of course, they should rightly be able to do so. In other words, members of the LGBTQI community do not go around deliberately assaulting emergency service workers and deliberately transferring their body fluids to them. This bill will only come into play if those persons were to assault and deliberately transfer body fluids onto the workers prescribed in the bill. It needs to be pointed out and noted that the same provisions of the bill apply equally to members of the heterosexual community. This bill does not discriminate against a particular or individual group of society. To do so would be morally wrong and something this Parliament should not and would not support. Now, to that regard, both the New South Wales Police Association and the Public Service Association of New South Wales made submissions and gave evidence to the Law and Justice Committee when we examined the bill. Those two bodies represent a very large and diverse workforce. Both of those unions have members that identify as being in the LGBTQI cohort. At no stage did those unions indicate that their LGBTQI members had any issues with the bill. They don't. And do you know why, Mr Deputy President? Because they know this bill targets those that commit disgusting criminal acts, no matter of their sexual identity, not innocent members of the LGBTQI community. There is simply no evidence to support the suggestion that members of that LGBTQI community go around with the intention of deliberately applying bodily fluids to emergency workers. And this bill applies equally to all. It should be remembered that provisions of the Traffic Act already provide for the mandatory taking of blood from those involved in motor vehicle collisions. I'm yet to see any evidence that suggests that it targets only members of the LGBTQI community. Now, I've heard opponents of this bill state that this bill impinges the right of individuals to privacy and the integrity of their own selves. Well, perhaps they should consider that before they unlawfully assault and transfer their bodily fluids onto others. And while we're at it, though, what about the right to body integrity of the worker? They didn't ask to be spat on, have faeces thrown at them, urine tipped over them, or someone else's blood introduced into their body. Mr Deputy President, sitting on the Law and Justice Committee, I've had the opportunity of reading all the submissions, hearing the evidence from relevant stakeholders and examining the bill closely. And to that regard, I'll be moving a couple of amendments myself in the committee stage. Those amendments do not alter the intention of the bill, but merely add to the integrity of the bill and may go some way in appeasing some stakeholders' concerns. And I look forward to discussing them further in the committee stage.
Honourable Emma Hurd.